And tell me when you see us live, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Bum, ba, bum, 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 bum.
Okay, we should be live now.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, so good. Hi, if you're just catching us, we're just getting set up for tonight's performance, which starts at 8:10. Khartoum, Theater Rhinoceros presents Gordon at Khartoum. Great. So if we could go over to first lobby card.
Okay.
Beautiful. Great. So I'm going to turn off mic and video, and I'll check in with you at 7:10.
7:10. Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
Sure.
Hey, Joe.
Hey there.
Hey, so good. Let's turn that on. Great. And we're going to start recording
Okay.
and just checking my sound. Uh, okay. Test, 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 test.
Sounds good.
Good. Thank you. And the shot looks good.
The shot is good. Lighting's very good.
Okay, great. All right, good. Okay, good. I see we're recording. Okay, good. So I will check in with you a little before 8.
A little before 8? Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot. If you're tuning in, we are beginning our performance of Gordon of Khartoum at 8:10 p.m. Join us. Bye. Hey, Joe.
Hello.
Hey there. So I just want to check my sound one more time.
Sound is good.
Let me just let's bring this up. There we go. And test, test.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Let me just do a little test, test.
Still good.
Okay, good. Thank you. And the shot's good.
Shot is very good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to begin shortly in just a few minutes. So thanks for being here. Yay! Hello, my name is John Fisher, and this is Gordon of Khartoum. I imagine myself as General Gordon in his dressing gown, early morning on the terrace of his palace in Khartoum, the Sudan, in 1884, scanning the horizon, looking desperately for the British Army, the British relief expedition, come to save him, come to relieve him, come to deliver him from the Mahdi. At some point, all my writing became gay. Now, that's a very interesting sentence for me to say because, of course, it begins with all my writing, which indicates that I was a writer. That's what I'd always wanted to do, tell stories. So that's pretty unique and wonderful to me, just that part of it. But when they all became gay, it became even more wonderful because it unlocked a whole new way of storytelling for me. I was so excited about expressing the stories, so thrilled. You see, I'd grown up around a lot of stories. There were always stories in my world as a child. There were movies, of course, that I saw on TV mostly, wonderful movies. And those movies inspired me to read books. And once I started reading books, I unlocked a whole new set of stories and a whole new way of experiencing stories, participating in stories. And finally, there was make-believe. I could make believe my own stories. I could make them up. I could go on adventures in my house. I could go out into the woods or in any part of my house and just imagine things. And I could start talking to myself, making up dialogue. And to this day, I walk around with dialogues in my head, sometimes articulated on my bicycle, in the shower, as I'm walking around, just dialogues about anything, things I've read about, history, current events, anything like, I don't want to leave the White House. I don't want to leave the White House. Mr. President, you've got to leave the White House, okay? You've got to get out. I don't want to. I don't want to. I want to stay here. I want to stay here. No, you got to be out by January, Mr. President. I mean, they want to get in here earlier because they want to fumigate, but you've got to leave. I don't want to. Well, you can set up down the street. You can set up on like 1900 Pennsylvania. Yeah, you can have your own house down there, like a separate house, but you can't be in this one anymore. I'll set up in the basement. I'll stay in the basement. You can't do that. Yeah, I'll stay in the basement. Nobody will notice. They won't notice me in the basement. And I just walk around with dialogues flowing through my head and adventures. And I love to take adventures anywhere and tell stories as I take them. As I said, this was inspired, first of all, by movies, wonderful movies. And I used to watch them on TV. And if you grew up in the Bay Area, you know all of these TV stations that showed the old movies. There was KTVU, Channel 2. They showed good movies on the weekends. There was Channel 44, my favorite. I loved 44 because they showed the Brady Bunch, but they also showed movies. They were wonderful that way. Oh, and there was TV 20, run by that weirdo James Gabbert. Remember him? Turned out that he was like this gay sexual predator. He's like, don't go into the hot tub with your boss if he's James Gabbert, okay? It was terrifying. And he used to have like dance parties on TV and throw parties in between the movies. And you had to like watch people dance. It was so weird. But they showed movies. They did show movies. And of course, the networks showed movies, channels 4, 5, and 7. But their movies were more psychological. They were like modern movies. You know, they were like Faye Dunaway and Jack Nicholson. I wasn't into that. I was a kid. I didn't understand all this sexual psycho stuff. You know, I wasn't so much into those. And oh my God, there was this TV station and it was broadcast from San Jose, right? And when I was growing up, I thought San Jose was like the squarest place, totally the squarest place. But they had a TV station. It was called 36, TV 36, and they actually hired Carol Doda to be their spokesperson. And they would like have her voiceover going, hello, this is Carol Doda. I'm the perfect 36. And I was like, what? Carol Doda? She was like a stripper on Broadway. She had this huge picture of her on Broadway, you know, done in neon with all the, you know, with everything was neon, right? She was huge on Broadway. And this square TV station in this square town, San Jose, hired her to be the spokesman. Hello, it's Carol Doda. It was hysterical. But they showed movies too. So I loved The Perfect 36. And I grew to love Carol Doda. And one movie that was always on TV, no matter what the station, it must have been cheap or something, I don't know, but they all showed it at one point or another, was a movie called Khartoum. There it is, starring Charlton Heston and Laurence Olivier. This movie was always on. I got to know it intimately. And I didn't like Charlton Heston. I didn't like him at all. Well, for a lot of reasons. First of all, I thought a lot of his stuff was really boring, but also he scared me. This guy terrified me. You see, the movies he was making in the 70s when I was growing up were horrifying. They're all about the future and how the future was going to be really screwed up for humans. It was going to be horrible. And it's like, remember Planet of the Apes? At the end, there's the huge Statue of Liberty in the sand, and he falls on his knees and he says, "You idiots! You," and he always acted like that. He was like, "You idiots, you did it. You finally did it." And the humans had blown up the world through a nuke war, and now the apes had taken over. Oh, and Omega Man, where he's being chased around LA by zombies, right? I mean, that's not even the future. I mean, there's a lot of zombies in LA. It does happen. It happens even now. But these were like blood-sucking zombies. They had like no blood in them. So they would like bite you and turn you into a zombie. And the worst, the most horrifying Charlton Heston 70s movie was Soylent Green. And it was set to the most beautiful Beethoven music, but it was horrifying. And it turned out at the end that, okay, so the premise was that New York City had 40 million people in it because of overpopulation. The environment had been destroyed. And at the end, it turned out that everybody was a cannibal. Yeah, they were eating Soylent Green, these green crackers that it turns out were made out of people because there was no food left. It was horrible. It was like the most horrible. So this actor like really scared me. But it wasn't just that he scared me in the 70s. I used to think back on his movies that were made in the 50s that were always on TV. The most boring movies of all time. They were terrifying. I mean, and some of them are incredibly famous, like the Ten Commandments. I was like, it's so boring. It's like 95 hours long. It's unrelenting. It's like a class in religion. It just goes on. Okay, yes, all right, yes, all right. No, I understand. I hear you. The parting of the Red Sea is great. Yes, that's great, but that's 5 minutes. That is 5 minutes. Oh, yes, you're right. Ann Baxter is great. The way she says, "I love you, Moses." Oh, Moses. Where did she get those M's? Those are the most luxurious M's in acting history. Moses. Oh, I love you, Moses. But she's like another 10 minutes. That's 15 minutes out of 95 hours of biblical boredom. And then throwing commercials, and it's 170 hours. It was like horrifying. And he was always at the center of these things. Ben-Hur, another snorer. Yeah, okay. The Chariot Race. Yes. Great. Stephen Boyd, beautiful when he's all oiled up, beautiful. But that's like 20 minutes. The rest of Ben-Hur is this whole like crucifixion, Jesus, conversion, fundamentalist propaganda thing. And it's so boring. And with the commercials, hideous. So this actor, I mean, by the time I came to Khartoum, I was either bored by him or horrified of him. So I stumbled across this movie. The other star, of course, was Laurence Olivier. Wonderful Laurence Olivier. You see, when I was studying acting in the 70s and 80s, he was the god. Everybody talked about how he was the best actor of all time. And I read his autobiography. Yeah, right. And it was like every great stage role that could be played, he played, and he did it brilliantly. It made me want to see him on stage, and I never did. But I did see his movies. If any actor made more boring movies than Charlton Heston, it was Laurence Olivier. It was like, have you ever seen Hamlet? Have you ever seen his Hamlet? It is such a snorer. It's dark. Be warned. It is so dark you will fall asleep. It is hideous. So by the time I came to this movie, I was terrified because here were the two big snorers of all time, and they were in a movie together. This would be horrible, but it wasn't. From the minute it started, I was entranced by that music, that wonderful music. Da 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 da. Oh, and the music is introduced in this scene. The music is based on Elgar, right? The great composer of the British Empire, which is when the movie is set. And the music is introduced in this wonderful scene. It breaks my heart every time. Gordon has now gotten his assignment from Prime Minister Gladstone to go to the Sudan and rescue it from the Mahdi. And Gladstone takes off in his train, and Gordon is just walking through the train station surrounded by steam, and that music starts. Da 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 da. It's like a call to adventure. It's also a call to something else. So here's the thing. Something happens when you're gay. And that was a very gay moment for me in that movie. And I knew something was up with this character because something happens to you when you're gay. And that is that you need to see other gay people. You have to. Everywhere. You need to see them on screen. You need to see them at school. You need to read about them in history. You need to experience them. You're like a toddler. You know how toddlers only notice other toddlers, right? They see another toddler and they run up and they start playing. Or cats. Cats are that way. They always see other cats. They need to see other cats. Or dogs. Dogs are always like sniffing each other's butts. Yeah, that's what you need to do as a little gay kid. You need to sniff another little gay kid's butt. You need to find other gay kids. That's the thing. You have to discover them. But how? How do you spot gay characters in fiction, on film, in history? How do you spot them? Well, in history, they're telltale signs, right? The character doesn't have a wife, doesn't have children, is in an all-male profession like the army or the navy or the church. And these things all apply to Gordon in that movie. General Gordon, played by Charlton Heston, says, I never married. I'm not interested in women. I lead a loner's life. And you're like, wait a minute. Is this guy gay? And that music, da, 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 adventure. He's headed off into the adventure of gaydom. That's the subtext for me. Finally, I discovered a wonderful book called Eminent Victorian Soldiers, and that unlocked all of these characters for me. Because after Khartoum, the movie, I was obsessed with Victorian era generals, 19th century generals. And this book is amazing because it outs all these people. First and foremost, probably the greatest general of the 19th century going into World War II, none other than Kitchener. Yes, that's Kitchener. Yes, and he was gay. There he is. Britons, Kitchener wants you. He wants you to enlist for World War I. And this book you recognize that picture, don't you? Yeah, because it inspired this picture. Yeah, right? Uncle Sam, I want you. Yeah, that was stolen from Kitchener. Uncle Sam wasn't gay. He's not gay. No. Well, first of all, he's fictional. So, he can't really be gay. But also he's, look at him. He looks like Colonel Sanders, he's just not, he would not last long in the gay world, right? But this book, Byron Farwell's book, talks about how Kitchener was gay. I was so inspired. I wrote a play about Kitchener to out him, to bring him out. Also in this book, the most amazing general, probably the best general of the 19th century, Hector MacDonald. Fighting Mac was gay. And we know for sure that he was gay. It's not a secret because he was caught having sex with men and he was hounded unto suicide in 1903. He was actually driven to suicide because he was persecuted by the authorities. We know that he was gay. And finally, in this book, Charles Gordon, the hero of Khartoum, the character that Big Charlton played, Charles Gordon. Now, was he gay? Was he gay? We'll get back to that. We'll talk about that soon. Now, we're going to need some analogies, because the British Empire it can be very confusing, right? You all know about Queen Victoria and all that stuff, but the details of the British Empire can be very confusing. They can be maddening. The best way to think about the British Empire is to think about the American Empire right now. We are the British Empire right now. Everything that we're doing in the world, invading countries, bullying countries, expanding our markets so that we can overwhelm countries, is exactly what the British did in the 19th century. They were the bullies of the world. They had the Navy, the Army, they had the money, they could take over the world. It's just like the United States now. And they had all of the same obsessions that we have. They were obsessed with China. We're obsessed with China. They were always getting involved, messing around in Afghanistan. We're always messing around in Afghanistan. They're always making judgments on third world countries like Sudan, right? Human rights in Sudan, which we do too. And I think that when liberals start talking, hey, I'm gay. So I want gay rights everywhere. But I think when Americans start saying, we need to have that in Sudan, it's giving our army an excuse to invade. We shouldn't be so judgmental. But the British were that way, just as we are now. That's the best way to understand Britain in the 19th century. They are what we are now, masters of the world. In the 1800s, the British were protecting their economic domination of the world. That's what they were doing with their army and navy and all their money. They wanted to protect that domination. The expression, the sun never sets on the British Empire, well, maybe true, but it certainly never set on British economic interests. They were everywhere, all over the globe. It always shone full midday sun on British economic interests. So something happened in 1860 in China. The British had a great thing going in China. They were importing opium to China. They would take opium and sell it in China, and they were making a ton of money off of it. And all the Chinese were becoming opium addicts. This was a problem. The Manchu dynasty, the Qing dynasty, which ruled China, the emperor decided that his people were being destroyed by this opium. And he told the British to get out, stop selling opium, leave his people alone. The British said no, and war was declared. And suddenly they were fighting. There was a war between China and Great Britain. Now, at this time, Gordon had gone through the military academy. He was kind of a bully in the military academy. That's what was weird about him. He was kind of sadistic. And we'll get back to the reasons why that might have been. He had graduated. He had gone to the Crimea, fought in the Crimean War as an engineer. And then he went to China to fight in the Opium Wars, they were called, the wars between China and Great Britain. Britain protecting its markets, China trying to get rid of the opium. Well, he didn't get there in time for the war, but he was there in time for the sacking and destruction of the Summer Palace, this beautiful palace in Beijing. He was part of the looting of that palace. He didn't participate himself, but he was a witness to it. So the war, the Opium Wars were over, but something else had happened in China concurrently. In the 1840s and 1850s, there was a rise of a man. He would form what was known as the Taiping Empire. The Taipings, that's what they were. His name was Hong Zhuguan, and he was not a very successful young man. He wanted to be a civil servant, but he failed the civil service test, which is a big deal in China, and he was humiliated. He was embarrassed, and he fell under the sway of a Methodist missionary from the United States. He became a Christian. And one day he had a vision. He had a vision of himself as the heavenly king, the king of heaven. He saw himself. He decided that he was the brother of Christ, sent down as a prophet to save the people of China, to make them Christians and lead them in a huge civil war to push out the alien Manchu dynasty, the Qing dynasty. They came from Manchuria. They didn't think they were Chinese. The Taipings didn't think they were Chinese. He was going to push out the Manchu dynasty and get rid of the British. And here he is, Hong Zhuguan, the heavenly king, the leader of the Taipings. He rose in the south of China, near Hong Kong, and then he started moving north. And how did he bring people to him? Did they just believe his story? Well, yeah, they believed his story, but also he produced miracles. What miracles? He defeated anybody who came against him. When the Manchu emperor sent an army against him, he defeated it. Anybody who was sent against him, he defeated, and thus began the biggest civil war in history. 10 to 20 million people were killed, the bloodiest civil war in history. And it was all about China for the Chinese. The Taipings, the heavenly king, Hong, was going to deliver China to the Chinese, get rid of the Manchu dynasty, get rid of the British, get rid of the foreigners, and make China for the Chinese. 10 to 20 million people died in this civil war. It was bloody. It was outrageous. His armies moved north, and finally they captured Nanking in a bloody conquering of the city of Nanking, and that became the Taiping capital. Now, Nanking is sort of a sad city because it's famous for the Taipings who brought a lot of blood to that city, but they are revered. That's one of the big tourist sites in Nanking are the Taiping sites because, well, they made China for the Chinese. So they've been revered by the nationalists, by the communists. They were the first China for the Chinese movement, but also because of what the Japanese did there in World War II. The Japanese entered Nanking, and thus the rape of Nanking. 100,000 Nanking civilians were killed. Women were raped, brutalized. It was a horrifying history. And the other sites that you go to see when you go to Nanking are the tributes to those who died at the hands of this Japanese Holocaust, the rape of Nanking. Now, what happened next was, and this was a mistake on the Taiping's part, because this is where it started to unravel, they started to menace Shanghai. So if you look at this map, right, here is Nanking. At the other end of the Yangtze is Shanghai. Now, the problem with menacing Shanghai was that that's where the British were, that's where the French were, that's where the Europeans were. That was the base for their import business. And even though they had defeated the Manchu dynasty, they're now working with the Manchu dynasty again to increase the imports. And when the Taiping started threatening them, The British got upset. Fortunately, they got into Shanghai, but they were pushed out, fortunately for the British, not for the Taipings. And now Governor Li of the Manchu dynasty formed an army called the Ever Victorious Army. It was easy for him to form because he could get money from the British merchants. And he needed a general to lead this army. And who'd he find? Young Charles Gordon, yes, who was only a major at the time. He was a major in the British Army, stationed in China, but he was loaned out by the British to lead this Chinese army of the Manchu dynasty. Now, you could do that. The British, if they agreed with the policies, they would loan out their generals. So now Gordon will lead what was called the Ever Victorious Army, an army of Chinese soldiers off to fight the Taiping. His immediate boss was Governor Li. Governor Li was in charge of the area. He was the governor, but Gordon was the commander of the Ever Victorious Army. Now, any other general would have hated this assignment because look at it. This is the Yangtze Delta. Here is Shanghai. This is where they need to get to, Nanking. Between it, all those lines are rivers or lakes or swamps. It was a general's nightmare. Rivers, lakes, and swamps. Rivers are a general's nightmare. Even up to World War II, 1945, rivers were nightmares to generals. The Rhine River, a nightmare to the American generals, to the German generals, to everybody. The Vistula River, a nightmare to the Russians and the Germans, a nightmare. They impede movement. It's hard to get soldiers across rivers unless you're a man like Gordon. Gordon, inspired by Ulysses S. Grant and his Civil War campaigns on the Mississippi, adopted amphibious war, right? The indirect approach. So Gordon wouldn't attack directly. He would use riverboats, load his men on them, load his artillery on them, and sneak up behind the enemy. Indirect amphibious warfare in 1866. That's what Gordon would do to win this battle. He had to get from Shanghai to Suzhou to Nanking. That's what he had to do. But he had to get all of these other cities in between. And he would do it using amphibious warfare. And he did it only carrying a walking stick. He didn't lead his men with a sword or a pistol. He had a walking stick. Remember Teddy Roosevelt? Walk tall and carry a big stick. Gordon would have said, walk tall and carry a regular sized stick. It will inspire your men. Remember, he was fighting a god, the heavenly king. Hong was the brother of Jesus, so he had to be godlike. He couldn't carry a gun. He had to look like he was impervious to danger, so he just carried a stick. And he led his men in this massive amphibious war to get from Shanghai to Nanking. First, he had to get Tatsan right here. Did he attack it directly? No. He went up behind it and took it from the rear. Then he had to get Gyeongsang right here. Did he attack it directly? No. He went to the city nearby it, Chunyi, and got that first and then got Gyeongsang. Then he had to get the prize, Suzhou. This is a famous city, Suzhou. Even now, it has all these beautiful temples and lakes. The tourists love it, beautiful museums. But at that time, it was a major hub. It was a hub of all transportation. You can see all the canals go there. And he had to get Suzhou. Suzhou was going to get tough. It was going to get tough to get into it. So he went the indirect route by capturing first Kapu and then Pataccio. Once he had Kapu and Pataccio, he had the key. He had the key. He would get into Suzhou and he'd be that much closer to Nanking. Now, let me pause for a second and talk about movies and books. You know, you hear all this propaganda about how important it is to read books and how kids need to read books. And a lot of it, I think, is like sort of hocus pocus, you know, metaphysical kind of like, it's not very specific. Well, here's why you need to read books. Because movies are too good. They're too seductive. You watch a movie, you've got all that beautiful music. Da, 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 da. You've got all those beautiful actors, all that beautiful scenery and cinematography. It's too seductive. It overwhelms you. Every time I watch a movie for the next 3 days, I can't stop thinking about it. I feel like I'm in it. And then I just get depressed because I know I'll never be a General Gordon or a Moses or a Ben-Hur. And then I just get depressed because I've been overwhelmed by the experience. But with a book, you get to create your own experience. You make your own music. You see your own sights. You hear the characters different from anybody else. And you also get an interpretation. So you can read another interpretation and another one. So if it's history and you're reading about Gordon, you can read 4 different versions of Gordon and come up with your own. Books are magic. They're a little more difficult, but they're soulful. They have a soul. It's like movies are like prostitutes. They're like professional prostitutes. They give very good value, but ultimately it's just professional, and you're kind of depressed because nothing but like I know anything about prostitutes. I mean, I've seen a lot of movies and read books, so I know about prostitutes. It's too professional. There's no soul. But a book is like a husband or a wife, and they're the best, right? Because it's a collaboration. You're figuring it out together. You're writing your own story. Yeah. Noel Coward, one of my favorite playwrights, he once said, it's amazing how potent cheap music is. It's true. Movies are like music. They overwhelm you. They dominate you. They seduce you in and then spit you out feeling like, what happened? What happened? But a book can tell you everything. And that's what happened with me and Gordon. Here I was embarking on his whole China campaign. That wasn't in the movie Khartoum, and it was wonderful. It was so much more impressive than anything he did in Khartoum. So Gordon's strategies were pretty simple. Meet and talk. Always meet and talk with your enemy. You have a lot in common with your enemy, so get together with him and talk. So he called his enemy, the general in command of the Taiping troops in Suzhou. His name was Lar Wang. That's what the Heavenly King called all his generals, the Wangs. This man's name was Lar Wang. And Gordon got together with him to talk. He also recruited ex-Taipings. Now, Governor Li, who was his boss, essentially killed all the Taipings he captured. He just killed them out of spite. But Gordon captured them and turned them into his own soldiers. It makes total sense. Of course they'd fight for Gordon. They were happy. He hadn't killed them. He was feeding them, and they were warriors. They wanted to fight. They wanted to fight. And they knew what the winning side was, Gordon. So he always took his prisoners and put him back into his army. Like 3 days later, they were fighting for him against their old friends, the Taipings. So it's very interesting. Always meet with your enemies to talk. Always talk with your enemies. It's like that expression, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. It makes sense. I mean, your friends, you like your friends because, they do things that you like, but your enemies are probably a lot more like you than your friends are because they are your enemies. They're competing. They're doing what you do. And there's going to be a lot of things that you agree on if you can just get together and meet with them. So he got together with Lar Wang and he said, look, you're going to lose. You've been losing all over the Yangtze Delta. You have been losing, okay? So don't fight me. Don't fight me. And here's why you shouldn't fight me. Because if you let me win, I will make sure that my army and Governor Li's army do not kill you or any of your men. Your men will not be slaughtered. If you surrender, you will survive. That's a promise. And you're not going to win, so you might as well surrender and live. And it was interesting. Lar Wang agreed. He agreed with Gordon. That's the magic of it. He actually agreed with him. And Gordon entered with his ever victorious army into Suzhou. There was no resistance. And Governor Li entered with his army. And immediately all the Taipings were slaughtered, killed in cold blood by Governor Li and his army. So here's another lesson I learned, and I heard it first from Gordon. Always, always, always be sure of what you're doing. Gordon made a promise, but he couldn't keep it. It wasn't a definite. He had not set up, he could not rely on Governor Li to keep his promise. I had these same experiences teaching. I was always asked as a teacher to be doing things that I didn't really think I should do. I didn't think that they were appropriate, but I would do them because the faculty told me to do them. And finally, something came up and I was told I should do something. I said, I don't want to do that. And I was told again, and I said, okay, listen, let's do some horse trading. If I do this, what do I get? And I was told by this faculty member that I would be teaching a class in the next semester. I said, great, that's a great bargain. I did the thing. Didn't want to do it. It was fine. I did it. I went back to him and said, you know what? We're not going to hire you. Sorry. I didn't have a guarantee. I made a bargain without getting it in writing. Gordon had done the same thing. He had no guarantee, and he was betrayed by Governor Li, who went in there and slaughtered all the Taipings. And Gordon was furious. He felt like he'd been betrayed, and he had no control over his temper. He was insane, and he was going to launch his army against Governor Li. He was going to join the Taipings and fight Li, but he withdrew into his tent, enjoyed some brandy and sodas for a while, and eventually emerged, and he got over it. He moved on. Another lesson I learned from Gordon. No matter how passionate you are, no matter how insane you are, no matter how angry you are, at some point you have to move on. He moved on. It was a bait and switch. Governor Lee knew what he was doing. And once it was done, he went right ahead and killed Lar Wang, the general, and all of the Taiping. Finally, they had one more city to get. And that was down here, Hankow, the last great city between Shanghai and Nanking. And this city, they were not going to be able to get around. They were not going to be able to use the indirect approach, the amphibious assault. They could not. And then Gordon just had to do what every general has to do every once in a while. He had to do a front-on attack. He had to bang his head against the wall of Hankow. And he led his troops out in front with his stick to show them that he was as much of a god on earth as the heavenly king. And the ever victorious army broke into Hankow, and the Taipings were defeated. There would be no China for the Chinese. That was the tragedy. But in Gordon's career, they'd been defeated. And then the armies of Governor Lee and Gordon moved towards Nanking, the Taiping capital. When they got there, they discovered that all of Hong's wives, the heavenly king's harem, had hung themselves. And Hong, the heavenly king himself, the brother of Jesus, had swallowed gold, died, and ascended to heaven, a martyr. Gordon was lionized. He was made a Mandarin by the Manchu emperor. Here he is in his Mandarin costume, which you can only wear with permission. He was made a field marshal in the Chinese army, and he was offered millions. And guess what? He declined it. Another lesson I learned from Gordon, he declined it. You see, the problem with taking millions is suddenly people have control over you. But if you don't take the millions, they don't have control. Now, I've never been offered millions, so it's been very easy for me. Nobody has any control over me because I've never been offered millions, so it's very, but Gordon is a good lesson, something to remember. Never take the millions. He kept his control. He was labeled Chinese Gordon because of his victory in China. And this picture was in all the papers in London. He was lionized, celebrated. His glories were sung to the stars by the London press. He became the most famous man in Britain. Now, beware success in the press. Another lesson, because you know what happens when you get any success in the press? Suddenly, all your peers become jealous. And then they're not going to help you. Success in the press is a mixed blessing. And that is exactly what Gordon learned. Because, it's great if people above you now want to help you. But if they don't, guess what? Everybody at your level isn't going to help you anymore because they're jealous and they're bitter. And that is exactly what happened to Gordon. His work in China was done. The ever victorious army was disbanded. He went back to Great Britain and he was posted to Gravesend. Perfect name for this posting because it was a grave and it was the end of a career. He was posted to the Thames estuary to build forts on the Thames estuary. The greatest general in the British Army now has to build forts. Well, he always had a great belief in himself. That's something else I learned from Gordon. No matter what happens, believe in yourself. And something very interesting happened to him at Gravesend. He discovered religion. Now, he'd never been like a zealously religious man, never. His sister Augusta was, but suddenly at Gravesend, he discovered religion. The Bible became the only book he read. He quoted Isaiah all the time, and he started to help people, individuals, old women, widows who were dying. He went and visited them. Poor people, he gave them food. He was especially interested in helping young boys, orphans. And, this is the era of Charles Dickens, right? So there's a lot of orphans running around. He would take these boys in. He would feed them. He would clothe them. He would educate them. He would get them jobs in the Navy. He even bathed them. And you begin to wonder, was he a pederast? Was he a pederast? Now, there's no evidence for that. None. And I want to clear something up along the way. If you're a pederast, that doesn't make you gay. If you have sex with young boys, you're not gay. That's different. Pederasty is different. That's a different category. It doesn't mean you're gay. It means you're a criminal. Okay? Well, anyway, he wasn't a pederast. There's no evidence for that. He just had a great affection for boys and wanted to help them. And there were so many on the streets. He was a great help to them. He called these boys his kings. Was he gay? There's more evidence for that because he always had attractive servants. The first one was when he was going to the Crimea. It was a Russian named Ivan. And then there were always attractive, like 18-year-old men working for him. He always had very attractive servants around him. So was he gay? It depends on who you read because the story keeps changing. That's the great thing about reading books, right? I said that. The first great biography of him, and there have been dozens, but the first great one is probably the best. It's called The End of General Gordon, and it's written by Lytton Strachey, that wonderful author of the Bloomsbury Group. And here he is in a painting by Carrington, his best friend. Now, Lytton Strachey wrote this wonderful biography of him, and he did mention that there were a lot of young men who worked as servants in his life, not boys. There's no evidence for boys, but there is evidence of young men, 18, 19-year-olds in his life. But that's all he says. He doesn't say anything else. Why does he say more? Why doesn't he solve the mystery of Gordon's homosexuality? Well, it was 1918 when Lytton Strachey wrote this book. And guess what? Lytton Strachey himself was gay. He was about as openly gay as you could be in 1918. Everybody knew except the public. And if he talked too much about Gordon's homosexuality, guess what? He would have basically been outing himself. The next great account of his life is Heaven's Command by James Morris, written in 1973, beautifully written. Here's James Morris, this wonderful book about the British Empire. And he talks about these young men, these 18, 19-year-old servants of Gordon's, but he doesn't say whether or not they're homosexual. He doesn't go there. Why not? Well, James Morris was himself queer, and he underwent gender reassignment surgery and became Jan Morris. So again, like Strachey, probably didn't want to put himself too far out there. He was going through his own conversion, his own adjustment as a queer man, as a queer individual, soon to be a transgender. Probably didn't feel safe talking about Gordon's sexuality. Finally, in 1978, a man named Trench wrote an academic biography of Gordon. And in this book, he devotes a lot of time to discussing Gordon's homosexuality. He says Gordon was not a pederast. No evidence for that. That's just people being paranoid. No. Was he gay? Trench says, yes, he probably was. But there was no way he was going to act on it because he was vulnerable. Remember, he was famous, and famous people can easily be brought down by blackmailers. There are a lot of people out to get him. And if he acted on his homosexual desires, he would be brought down and exposed, blackmailed and brought. Remember what happened to Hector MacDonald, the other British general who was exposed, persecuted unto suicide. So Trench thinks he just suppressed his sexuality. He self-repressed himself, would not let him express it. Finally, in 1985, that wonderful book by Byron Farwell, Eminent Victorian Generals. Farwell, 1985, he's just going to say it. Gordon's just gay. He was just gay. And he doesn't mince words about it because in 1985, he can talk about it. But he doesn't really say much about his sex life. And so you begin to wonder, what happened to his sex life? Did he have a sex life? Now, remember that discretion was very important at this time. I talked about Hector MacDonald, that great general, persecuted unto suicide, but also Oscar Wilde, persecuted unto suicide, right? He was exposed as a gay man right around the same time as Gordon, 1895. He was thrown in jail for being gay. He fled to France when he got out of jail, and he ate himself to death. I'm convinced he committed suicide by overeating. He gave himself a heart attack. Persecuted for being gay unto suicide. A more immediate example, an example relating to the military, was Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery. Many people have said he was gay. And when he was at the military academy, he was a sadist. So maybe that's what it was. Suppressing your sexuality makes you insane. He was sadistic. He married a woman for a couple of years. She died. He never remarried. And when he got into Parliament, he made a big point of signing off on any law that persecuted gay men. Many people have said he was a closeted homosexual, but he could never come out because he was in the British military. It's interesting. The next generation of gay men was Noel Coward. He was a member of that generation. And in 1899, he was born, and Noel Coward didn't come out of the closet until 1970. The shadow of Wilde loomed far and wide. And Gordon was smart enough, even before Wilde, to know that to act on your sexuality meant that you would be persecuted unto suicide. Coward didn't feel comfortable doing it until 1970. And there's a reason that he was the last great British actor to be knighted, because everybody knew, including the Queen, and she wasn't going to knight a gay man. When he finally came out, it was acceptable, and he was eventually knighted as a gay man. So what does it mean to be gay? Why is this so important to me? And why do I care about finding gays in the military? Why do I care? Why can't I be satisfied with like Rock Hudson and gay movie stars or gay politicians? You know, a lot of people think we had a gay president, James Buchanan, right? You know, and we had a gay presidential candidate recently. And what about Kamala Harris? I mean, I love her. She's local. She's great. But what? She just got married. You know, I think she might be a lesbian, which is great. Yeah. So why can't I just be satisfied with gay politicians? Why isn't that enough? Well, because I pay taxes. I pay taxes to the military, and I always felt that gays should be allowed to serve openly in the military. Now, I am a pacifist like everybody else. Everybody's like, why do you care about the military and gays in the military? I'm like, well, you know, because it's there. I pay taxes. And what am I going to do? Say I'm only going to pay taxes to the things I want, like bike lanes and potholes getting fixed, and I'm not going to pay for the military? No, I have to pay the taxes. So I want gays to be able to serve in the military. And God love Barack Obama for making that happen. God love him. They can serve openly. But also, I don't care about the contemporary military. I told you, I don't like American imperialism. I don't like it. But I find the stories of military history fascinating. And I want to find myself in all walks of life. And that's why these Victorian generals are so interesting to me, because they were gay and struggling with it and brilliant leaders. I find military history fascinating. And yet I'm a pacifist in the here and now. But I think gays should be able to serve so long as I have to pay taxes to the military. And you know what? For a lot of people in the United States, it's a great job. It's better than, you know, wherever they come from, getting a job, I don't know, Walmart or something. So yeah, gays in the military, it's important, and in history. So this religious fanaticism, I think it was sublimation. I think he was sublimating his sexuality. I think he was pressing it down because he knew, now that he was famous, that he might be caught and persecuted unto suicide. His next job was serving as Governor General of the Sudan. Now, the Sudan had been conquered by Egypt in 1820 and was now ruled by Egypt. The British said, it's fine, you can go off and serve in the Sudan. It's a good job for you. Go serve in the Sudan. He went to the Sudan, and his job, as he defined it, was to suppress slavery, to get rid of slavery in the Sudan. And he was very popular because, of course, Africa was one of the places where there was still slavery. And here he was in the 1870s going into Africa to suppress slavery. He arrived in the Sudan, and he immediately struck out into the desert, the Kordofan Desert, to meet with Zobair, the biggest slave trader in the Sudan. And Zobair had a huge army, and he was in defiance of Egypt. He would not swear loyalty to Egypt, and he was a slave trader. And Gordon adopted that old policy of his: go meet the enemy, just go meet him. He had nobody. He had only a few followers. They couldn't even keep up with him. He struck off into the desert on his camel alone, way ahead of his followers, and he arrived in Zobair's camp himself with like one assistant. And he was surrounded by thousands of Zobair's soldiers. And he walked right up to Zobair and he said, we need to talk. I'm the new governor general. You and I need to talk. Zobair was stunned, but he was like, okay. I mean, he's not going to kill him because that's just not fair. And, you know, Gordon had a conversation and they talked. And Gordon said, look, you can't take on Egypt. It's too strong. So just say that you're loyal to Egypt. It's fine. It won't change your life at all. Just say you're loyal. Zobair says, okay, that makes sense. And he says, Gordon said, and you've got to stop it with the slavery. You've got to stop it with the slave trading. It is really old news. It is sinful. It is bad. It is bad for the slaves. It is bad for you. It is bad. And Zobair goes, okay, I'll stop with the slaving. I'll stop slave trading. Yes. That's fine. And Gordon was like, great, problem solved. And he left. And it was written up in the London newspapers. He was the hero of London. The anti-slavers loved him. The church people loved him. Everybody loved him because he'd solved the problem of slavery in the Sudan by having one conversation. Well, of course he didn't. That was nonsense. Zobair went right back to slave trading. And Gordon spent 6 years racing around the Sudan, fighting battles, having conversations, trying to suppress the slave trade, trying to destroy it. And he never succeeded. But he was a hero in London. And the press never gets it right? So in London, they said, oh, he got rid of the slaves in the Sudan. He was a big hero. But Gordon knew it was impossible. You were never going to get rid of the slaves in the Sudan. He was depressed, but he had a great belief in himself. And he knew that this didn't mean he was a worthless individual. He tried as hard as possible. He always tried. When he fought the Taipings, he always tried. He kept talking to people, meeting with people, threatening them, attacking them. And it was his belief in himself that kept him going. And that was another lesson to me. It's like that Whitney Houston song, The Greatest Love of All. Yeah. That's you. You have to believe in yourself. And eventually he had the courage to quit the job because it was too frustrating. He could not solve the problem. He went to Jerusalem, and this is one of my favorite parts of his life, because he walked around Jerusalem with his Bible and he found all the right spots. Now, of course, when you go to Jerusalem, you see all these great sites. You see all these wonderful sites, where the crucifixion happened. And, but he went there and he said, that's all wrong. It's all wrong. I've studied the Bible. It's not, Gethsemane is here. The Garden of Eden is here. The crucifixion was actually here. The gates to hell are here. He was like, everything you've learned is wrong. And to this day, there are people who believe Gordon's version. You go to Jerusalem, you see everybody like seeing all the sites in Jerusalem. Yeah, there are people who still believe that all those sites are wrong, that Gordon got it right. He found the real sites. I think that's so charming. Meanwhile, back in the Sudan, things were getting intense. There was a man named Muhammad Ahmed, and he had a vision. He had a vision that he was the Mahdi, the chosen one, that Allah had spoken to him and said, you are the Mahdi. You are the expected one. Now, this is a tradition in Islam that the Mahdi will come and make believers of all and will set Islam on the right path. And the Mahdi said, I am that man. Muhammad Ahmed was the Mahdi. He had that vision. And people came to him. They flocked to him because the people in Sudan were desperate. They needed something. They were persecuted by people like Zobair and the slavers. They were persecuted by the Egyptians. They needed something, and they were drawn to Muhammad Ahmed. They believed that he was the Mahdi. He set up on Abba Island in the middle of the Nile in the southern Sudan, and people flocked to him. Why did they flock to him? Because they believed, and he looked like the chosen one. He fit the bill. He was tall. He was noble. He had the gap in his teeth. He looked like the chosen one. They believed it, but also like the heavenly king, like Hong in China, the Mahdi, Muhammad Ahmed, worked miracles. What miracles did he work? The Egyptians kept sending forces against him. He was going to start a liberation movement. He was going to make Sudan for the Sudanese. The Egyptians didn't like that, so they sent people to fight him. And Muhammad Ahmed, the Mahdi, always defeated them. Always. No matter how large the force, he defeated them. They came with guns. He fought them with swords, killed them, and took their guns. And he was becoming armed. He was working miracles. Here is the jibba. I think this is so charming. This is what the Mahdists wore. They were called dervishes. And this is what the dervishes, the followers of the Mahdi, wore. You see, now a basic desert outfit for the Kordofan, for Sudan's desert, is just this white. But the Mahdists added these beautiful patches. Isn't that spectacular? This is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum. These are prized items, the jibbas of the Mahdi and the Mahdists. So now people are coming to him. He's drawing people to him. People believe he's going to help them. He must be the Mahdi because he is bringing them hope, and he is getting rid of the Egyptians. He is bringing them freedom. He's going to make Sudan for the Sudanese. So the Egyptians retaliate with a 10,000-man army. They send an army of 10,000 armed men, a modern army, into the Kordofan, into the desert, under the command of a British officer. This man's name is Colonel Billy Hicks. He wins some early battles against the Mahdi. His confidence grows, and he leads this 10,000-man army into the Kordofan, and they're approaching the Mahdi's capital at El Obeid. And as they approach, suddenly they are ambushed by 40,000 Mahdists. And that army of 10,000 is slaughtered, utterly destroyed. All the British officers are killed. Colonel Billy Hicks is killed. It is a disaster. And as bad as all the murdering, the Mahdists got all the weapons. That is what's going to bring them freedom. They now have modern weapons. They get all the rifles. They get all the artillery. They get all the ammunition off of Billy Hicks's army. And now the Mahdists are an armed force in the middle of the Kordofan, the desert in Sudan. A disaster. So now, because a British officer was killed, the English are involved. Now England is involved in the Sudan. Also, England had invaded Egypt in 1882. The Egyptians weren't paying their debts to the English. They weren't paying the money they owed, the interest on the loans. So the English invaded and took over Egypt. And so now the English are responsible for Egypt. And if anything happens in Egypt, this is the problem with imperialism. Guess what? They are involved, right? They're involved in all the problems of Egypt. It is a disaster because now the British are doubly involved because of the loss of Colonel Hicks and the fact that they are occupying Egypt. And every dumb move the Egyptians make, like trying to suppress the Mahdi, the English are now involved in. So what are they going to do? What are the British going to do? The prime minister at the time was a fascinating man named William Gladstone. He was a liberal. He was a smart man. He was not an imperialist. It's amazing. At the time of the greatest surge in British imperialism, their prime minister was an anti-imperialist. And when they said, what are we going to do about the Mahdi? What are we going to do about the South Sudan? How are we going to revenge Hicks? What are we going to do? He said, nothing. We are going to do nothing. The Sudanese under the Mahdists are a people struggling to be free, and rightfully so. They have the right to be free, and we're going to let them be free. We are not going to go in there and destroy them. No. Shocking. Unfortunately, his cabinet were all imperialists, and they stuck around. They engineered the newspapers. They got the newspapers to keep crying for action, crying for action. That's what newspapers do. They're so good at it. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Who can solve this problem? Who can solve this problem? And finally, they set their eyes on a man who had proved himself as an anti-slaver, as a great churchman, as a great general, and had already served in the Sudan as governor general, Charles Gordon. That's what the newspaper said. Send Gordon, send Gordon. Give Gordon an army and send him into the Sudan and destroy the Mahdi. Get revenge. Well, Gladstone agreed. He said, yes, we'll send Gordon. Let's send Gordon, but we're not sending him with an army to destroy the Mahdists, to conquer Sudan for Great Britain. Let's just send him alone. We'll send him alone, and all he's going to do is evacuate the Europeans, including the British and the Egyptians. He's just going to get them out of there. That's all he said he was going to do. He was just going to evacuate the civilians, the Europeans and the Egyptians, from the Sudan. Gladstone was actually an enlightened leader, a liberal, a thinker, a well-meaning man, an anti-imperialist in an age of rampant imperialism. He should never have trusted his cabinet and Gordon. So now, Gordon is off to the Sudan. He takes a steamer and he crosses the Mediterranean. He's back in business. He has a job once again. After his sojourn in Jerusalem, doing nothing but finding the true locations of the Old Testament and the New Testament, now he has a job. Maybe the most important job on the planet, to go to the Sudan and evacuate the Europeans and let the Sudanese have the Sudan for the Sudanese. So Gordon was headed for the Sudan. He crossed the Mediterranean in a steamer. He arrived in Cairo. And he headed down the Nile to Khartoum, capital of the Sudan. Down the Nile, through ancient Egypt, the oldest masterful culture on the planet, into the Sudan. The Mahdi had captured all of the Nile south of Khartoum, so Khartoum was in grave danger. And as Gordon moved down the Nile into the Sudan, he made a mistake. He told the people who came to greet him, "There is Gordon." They were so happy, so thrilled. "Gordon has come to save us from the Mahdi." He told them, "I have not come to save you. I do not have an army. The British have not committed an army. I'm here to evacuate the Egyptians and the Europeans." And that's when the people of northern Sudan, many of them, decided to go over to the Mahdi, to join the Mahdi in his movement, because Gordon was not allowed to save them. Nevertheless, when he arrived in Khartoum, he arrived as a messiah. He was Gordon Pasha, back in his element, back to rule over the Sudan, a deliverer. He would deliver the people of Khartoum. But now, the Mahdi and his dervishes had closed in above Gordon. They'd cut off Khartoum. They'd seized all of the north of the Sudan. They closed in behind him. And now Gordon was cut off. And now Gordon had exactly what he'd always wanted. He knew that once he was in the Sudan, once he was in Khartoum, and once he was cut off, the British would have to send an army into the Sudan to rescue him, to rescue the most famous general in the British army. They could not leave him to rot. They would have to send an army. And once that army was there, who would command it? Other than Gordon. Gordon had never been allowed to command British troops, never. But now he would have an army, and he would lead that army in a glorious liberation of the Sudan from the Mahdi. He would command British soldiers in the field and lead them against the Mahdi. He would bring it back into Egypt and Britain's sway. The British would have to send an army to save Gordon. But he was up against Gladstone. Unfortunately for Gordon, he was up against Gladstone. Now, the newspapers are crying. They were crying for Gordon to be relieved. The imperialists called for relief. We must relieve Gordon. We must save him. But what they really wanted was conquest. They wanted Gordon to have an army to conquer the Sudan, and Gladstone would have none of it. None of it. Gordon wasn't, in fact, up against the Mahdi. He was up against Gladstone. Gladstone was in Parliament. People were screaming at him. Parliament screamed at him to save Gordon. And he said defiantly, "The Sudanese are a people struggling to be free, and rightfully so. They are right. They must be free. We will not send an army in there. Gordon can leave. He can come up the Nile in a steamer. He can escape. He's just staying there to blackmail us. We will not rescue him. The Sudanese are entitled to the Sudan." He would not save Gordon. It was a battle of wills between the Prime Minister Gladstone and General Gordon in Khartoum. A battle of wills, a furious battle of wills of two powerful personalities. And eventually this battle would destroy both of them. They'd both be destroyed by this battle, utterly. Meanwhile, all of Gordon's stratagems failed. He tried all of them. In the movie Khartoum, Gordon does exactly what he did in life. He goes to meet with the Mahdi, and those are the best scenes in the movie between Charlton Heston and Laurence Olivier. They're wonderful scenes, beautifully written, but they never happened. Gordon wanted to talk to the Mahdi, but the Mahdi was too clever for him. He didn't want to meet with Gordon. He didn't want to talk to Gordon. He didn't want to hear what Gordon had to say. He was much too clever, so he never met with him. Gordon tried to bring the Mahdists over to his side to join his Sudanese, the Sudanese in Khartoum. But the Sudanese under the Mahdi wanted to have nothing to do with Gordon. They wanted to be free. They wanted Sudan for the Sudanese. Gordon was an engineer. He realized that Khartoum was eminently defendable. You see, here's Khartoum. It's got a river on both sides of it, the Blue Nile and the White Nile, you see? So it's a peninsula. And what Gordon did was he dug a moat, a canal, around the city wall and flooded it and made Khartoum an island. Brilliant. Unfortunately, when the rains slackened off, the level of the water fell in the trench, in the moat, and one bank of the moat collapsed, and then the wall, the city wall above that bank also collapsed, and now there was a massive hole in the city wall. The city was permeable. The only thing that Gordon had going for him were the newspapers in London. They lionized him. He was their hero. He kept being lionized, celebrated. His praises were sung. Unfortunately, this just irked Gladstone. Gladstone did nothing. Nothing. Months passed. The summer came. The summer went. The Mahdi tightened his grip on Gordon in Khartoum. Gladstone wouldn't budge. He would not send an army to relieve him. Gladstone was absolute. If that man wants to leave, he can escape. He's just blackmailing us. He would not save him. He would not budge. The Mahdi sent a jibber. He sent one of those beautiful jibbers the Mahdi did to Gordon, and he said, come over to Islam. Join us, become a Mahdist, and we will take Islam to Cairo, throughout the world. We will make all the world see the greatness of the Mahdi. Amazing. And one almost believes that Gordon should have taken that path because the Mahdi was somebody worthy of him. He was a religious zealot, and Gordon would have made a great devotee. But he rejected the Mahdi's offer. He did not join him. He did not wear the jibba. In August, things changed in London. One of the cabinet, Lord Hartington, said he would resign if Gladstone didn't send a relief force. Now, Lord Hartington was a Whig, but he represented the rich Whigs, the wealthiest Whigs. And if Lord Hartington resigned from the cabinet would lose the rich Whigs, and the cabinet would then disintegrate, and Gladstone's government would collapse. So to stay in power, Gladstone made a compromise he should never have made. He agreed to send an army to relieve Gordon. The Mahdi, by this time, was besieging Khartoum. There were 35,000 people in Khartoum, Sudanese, Egyptians, the Egyptian army of 8,000, and Gordon. There were hundreds of thousands of Mahdists surrounding Khartoum. The siege began. In October, the Mahdi brought up his siege cannons, those that he had stolen, that he had acquired from Billy Hicks's army. He took up his cannons and began to bombard Khartoum. And still Gordon held out. He would not surrender the city. He wouldn't let the Egyptians flee. He stayed in Khartoum. The British relief force was assembling in Egypt. And in that relief force was Kitchener, Major Kitchener. So in a way, it was one gay man coming to save another. Kitchener was going to be a part of the relief force that would save Gordon. But it got ready slowly. This relief force was incredibly slow. Gordon was running out of food. He had very little ammunition. He was desperate. And finally, on December 30th, 1884, 9 months after the siege of Khartoum had begun, the relief force set out into the desert. The Camel Corps. There'd never been a Camel Corps in the British Army before, but now the British soldiers were riding camels, and they struck out in to the desert. Well, the Mahdists raced north to intercept them, and the Camel Corps formed a square of defense. Now, the square is a very important aspect of British military tactics, because the square is like a fortress. It's a fortress formed of humans and animals with the guns in the middle. So the humans and animals form a square, and it's like a fort. And this is how Wellington won Waterloo, with squares of flesh and guns. And the French could not penetrate the squares. They couldn't penetrate them. In fact, a British square had never been penetrated. And in the deserts of the north of the Sudan, the British formed a square with their camels and their guns and their soldiers. And for the first time in British military history, the Mahdists penetrated the square. It was a landmark event. They hurled themselves and they broke through into the center of the British square. Such a momentous event was this military history that Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem about it. And he referred to the Mahdists as the Fuzzy Wuzzies, a racist term, but a tribute to the Mahdists as the only people who ever broke a British square. The British reasserted themselves, they pushed the Mahdists out, they reformed their square, and then they moved forward. They had defeated the Mahdists. They moved to the Nile, to Metemma. They got onto steamboats at Metemma and they started to head down the Nile. The relief force was on its way. Meanwhile, Gordon had no idea. He didn't know where they were. Every day he went up onto the terrace in his dressing gown, and he looked out in the horizon, looking for the relief force. Where was it? Where was the British relief force? He heard rumors about it, but he couldn't be sure. The Mahdi was sure. His spies told them the relief force was on the river. It would be there soon. January. Gordon had held out for 10 months deep in the Sudan, in Khartoum, and finally in January, the Mahdi launched his assault. Hundreds of thousands of Mahdists descended on Khartoum. There was no possible way that Gordon and his 8,000 Egyptians could defend it. The wall had been breached by the collapsing canal, and the Mahdists poured through it. Gordon's diary survived, but it wasn't updated. We have only rumors for the last month of his time in Khartoum. Only rumors. But there are stories told of how he thought he would accept death. Would he fight? Would he fight to the death? Or would he just submit? Would he just submit to the Mahdi and see what the Mahdi would do? The Mahdists broke in to Khartoum. The slaughter began. They fought their way into the palace grounds. They fought their way into the palace itself. And Gordon decided just to walk amongst them. If they raised their swords, he would fight back. If they shot at him, he would shoot back. But if they did nothing, he would accept it. He would accept his fate as it was decreed by the Mahdists. He stood at the top of the stairs in the courtyard, staring at the Mahdists. And everybody was in awe. Here was the man that had launched hundreds of thousands of Mahdists. Here he was, Gordon of Khartoum. And finally, one of the Mahdists raised his spear, threw it at Gordon, and Gordon was killed. Captured in this famous painting from the Leeds Art Gallery, the cover of The End of Gordon by Lytton Strachey. The very end of Gordon. Gordon fell dead. He was beheaded. His head was paraded around Khartoum in celebration. 2 days later, the British Expeditionary Force arrived in its steamships. It approached Khartoum. It was sailing down the Nile to relieve Khartoum. And the relief force saw on the shore thousands of Mahdists in their beautiful jibbahs with the colorful patches dancing about. And the Egyptian flag, the British flag, all flags had been lowered. And the relief force realized that they were 2 days too late. The Mahdi had taken Khartoum. Too late, too late. A famous cartoon from the London papers. Too late. There is Britannia with a sword in shame, for the British had arrived too late. In the background, you can see the Mahdists swarming into Khartoum. The British had failed. Gladstone was pilloried. He'd been known as Gladstone, the grand old man, G-O-M, but now he was called Gladstone, M-O-G, murderer of Gordon. The Queen was furious. She wrote an excoriating letter to Gladstone, telling him that he had failed. Gordon was dead, and the government of Gladstone collapsed because he had failed. He had failed at Khartoum, but had he? He tried to stick to his principles. He tried to stick to his principles. In the end, he'd succumbed. Maybe if he'd stood by his principles and never sent an army, maybe if the army had not been a failure, he would have been successful. But he knuckled under the public opinion and failed. Ignominy. His government collapsed, and he left office as prime minister. In 1898, a new army was formed, a massive one, under the command now of the expert in African warfare, General Kitchener. And this army advanced on Khartoum. It'd been 13 years since the Mahdists had taken it. Sudan had belonged to the Sudanese for 13 years, but now this massive British army entered the desert and marched towards Khartoum under the command of the gay man, Kitchener, and also in this army was another gay man, Hector MacDonald, Fighting Mac, off to avenge Gordon, the gay man who died in Khartoum. It was a slaughter. 40,000 Mahdists were killed. Very few British died. And Khartoum was taken back from the Mahdists. The British conquered all of the Sudan. The Egyptians were put back in power, and thus ended Sudanese liberty. It was the end of the Mahdist movement. In the end of Gordon, Lytton Strachey blames Gordon for all this. He says that Gordon was responsible for the 40,000 being killed 13 years after his own death. But I don't think that's fair. Gordon wouldn't have done it like Kitchener and Hector MacDonald. Gordon would have talked to the Mahdi. He would have worked something out. He would have brought the Mahdists in somehow. He wasn't a man to slaughter. He was a man to negotiate. And what to make of this mixed up story of Gordon of Khartoum? Was he a great gay man? Was he a great general? Was he a great leader? He was against the slavery. He was against all slave trading. He always thought outside the box. He always thought beyond where he was. He was an individualist. But does that make him a great general? Was he an imperialist? I'm not sure. My whole life, I've struggled to understand this man. And maybe the fact that he couldn't be gay confused him. Maybe it drove him into a religious mania that was unreconcilable. Maybe it made him do irrational things, silly things, obnoxious things. I don't know. I continue to struggle with this man. This man I discovered in a movie, read books about, have played in my brain. This is my second performance piece about him as I continue to figure out, was Gordon a great man? He was certainly a great general. He was certainly a clever man. And he was certainly gay. But was he great? And what is greatness? There's much you can read about Gordon. I encourage you to look into his life. It's an amazing life, and the accounts are all different. Sometimes he's the hero, sometimes he's the villain, sometimes he's insane, sometimes he's the only rational person in all of imperialist Great Britain. Also Gladstone, a fascinating character who tried to be open-minded, tried to be liberal in the midst of imperialism, much that should speak to our own era, where we seem to be caught in an American empire, trapped on the treadmill of empire. Can we change? Is change possible? In the last couple of weeks, it seems like change is possible. It is. Maybe. Thank you so much for joining me for Gordon of Khartoum. My name is John Fisher. You were a terrific audience. This is a very exciting time for Theater Rhinoceros. We continue with our Thursday night projects, my essential service projects, ESP, I call them. Next Thursday, I'll be back with the Battle of Kursk, a gay perspective. What is life like for a gay man in Russia today? That's Thursday, next Thursday at 8. But tomorrow night, we have something very exciting, and that is the beginning of our season, our 2020-2021 season. Yes, we're launching into a new season, even in the midst of COVID-19, and we're beginning with an extremely exciting project, which is Overlooked Latinas, written and performed by Tina Delia, directed by Mary Guzman. I love this play. I saw a run through of it on Monday. It is wonderful. It's a one-person performance of a screwball comedy, but it's also got a heart, and it's also about the history of Latinx actors in Hollywood. It's incredibly moving, incredibly instructive, but more than anything, it's very, very funny. Please join us for that. It's beginning tomorrow night. You can still subscribe to our season. Also, this is the last weekend of Blood at the Root. I saw that last week also. That's our collaboration with Daryl V. Jones and Cal State East Bay. It's a wonderful play. This is not a live performance. It's actually a film. It was all shot observing COVID-19 protocols, and the actors are wonderful, and it's beautifully produced. So tomorrow night, a live show. Check it out on therhino.org. Through Sunday, Blood at the Root, more of a movie type production, but wonderful, an incredible show. Next week, I'll be back with my show about Russia. And through next weekend is Overlooked Latinas. And Overlooked Latinas is always live. You can support us by subscribing to our theater or making a donation. That's what keeps all this free programming going at therhino.org. That's therhino.org. And you can make a contribution on our website, or you can mail one to me at my COVID-19 office, John Fisher, Theater Rhinoceros, 91 Central Avenue, number 102, San Francisco, California, 94117. From me, from Charles Gordon, from General Kitchener, from General Hector McDonald, even from, I think, the gay-friendly William Gladstone. Good night, and thank you for joining me.